Long ago, in the ancient land of Egypt, a civilization flourished along the banks of the mighty Nile River. This land, rich in culture and history, was ruled by a powerful pharaoh. This pharaoh was not just any ruler, he was a tyrant who believed himself to be a god. His arrogance knew no bounds, and he demanded absolute obedience from his subjects. Pharaoh controlled the people with an iron fist, enslaving them and making their lives miserable. The Egyptians toiled day and night, building grand monuments and pyramids, their sweat and tears mixing with the sands of time. Among his subjects were the Israelites, a growing community that Pharaoh viewed with suspicion and fear. He saw their increasing numbers as a potential threat to his reign. The Israelites were different from the Egyptians. They believed in one God, a God who was not Pharaoh. This monotheistic belief set them apart and made them targets of Pharaoh's paranoia. As time passed, Pharaoh's paranoia grew. He became increasingly convinced that the Israelites would one day rise up and overthrow him. His advisors, feeding his fears, suggested drastic measures. In a cruel and unjust decree, Pharaoh ordered the killing of all newborn Israelite boys. This heartless command was meant to crush the spirit of the Israelites and eliminate any future threat to his power. Pharaoh's soldiers enforced this brutal order with ruthless efficiency. They stormed into Israelite homes, tearing infants from their mothers' arms. Mothers cried as their baby boys were snatched away from them. The wails of the grieving mothers echoed through the land, a haunting reminder of Pharaoh's cruelty. Fear and despair gripped the hearts of the Israelites. They lived in constant dread, knowing that their lives and the lives of their children were at the mercy of a tyrant. In their darkest hour, the Israelites turned to their God, the one true God, for help. They prayed fervently, their voices rising in unison, pleading for deliverance from Pharaoh's brutality. They prayed for a savior, someone who would lead them out of bondage and into freedom. Their faith was unwavering, even in the face of unimaginable suffering. Little did they know that God had a plan, a divine plan to free them from their chains and lead them to a promised land, a land flowing with milk and honey. This plan would unfold through a special child, a child destined to confront Pharaoh and demand the freedom of his people. This child was hidden by his mother, placed in a basket and set adrift on the Nile. This is the story of Musa Moses, a prophet of God, and his struggle against the tyranny of Pharaoh. From his humble beginnings to his rise as a leader, Moses' journey is one of faith, courage, and divine intervention. It is a story of faith versus arrogance, truth versus falsehood, and the ultimate triumph of good over evil. Through Moses, the Israelites would find their way to freedom, and Pharaoh's tyranny would be brought to an end. In these dark times, when the land of Egypt was shrouded in darkness and despair, a baby boy was born into the Israelite family of Imran. This child, though born into humble beginnings, carried a destiny that would change the course of history. This baby was no ordinary child, he was destined for greatness. His name was Musa, and his life was intricately woven into the divine plan of Allah. His mother, fearing for his life, hid him for as long as she could. The Pharaoh had decreed that all newborn Israelite boys were to be killed, and the threat loomed large over their heads, but as the infant grew, it became impossible to keep him hidden. His cries grew louder, and the risk of discovery increased with each passing day. Guided by Allah, Musa's mother placed him in a basket and set him adrift on the Nile River, the lifeline of Egypt. She crafted the basket with care, ensuring it would float and protect her precious child. It was a heart-wrenching decision, but she trusted in Allah's plan. With tears streaming down her face, she whispered a prayer, asking for divine protection over her son. She whispered a prayer, her heart filled with both fear and faith as she watched the basket float away, carrying her precious child. Her heart ached, but she held on to the hope that Allah would keep him safe. Meanwhile, at Pharaoh's palace, something unexpected happened. The grand halls and opulent rooms of the palace were about to witness a miracle. Pharaoh's wife, Asya, was known for her kindness and compassion, a stark contrast to her husband's cruelty. She was a beacon of light in the otherwise dark and oppressive environment of the palace. While her handmaidens were bathing in the Nile, they spotted the basket carrying baby Musa. The sight of the basket bobbing gently on the water piqued their curiosity. They brought the crying baby to Asya. The sound of his cries tugged at their hearts, and they knew they had found something extraordinary. Asya was instantly drawn to the infant. The moment she laid eyes on him, she felt an overwhelming sense of love and protection. She felt a deep love for him and decided to adopt him as her own son. Despite knowing the potential consequences, she was determined to keep him safe. This was a part of Allah's plan to have Musa raised in the very heart of Pharaoh's palace, protected and provided for. In the midst of the enemy's stronghold, Musa would grow, learn, and eventually fulfill his divine mission. And so Musa grew up in the palace of the Pharaoh, the very man who had ordered the death of his people. Despite the opulence and grandeur that surrounded him, Musa's heart was always heavy with the knowledge of his people's suffering. He was raised with the best of everything, surrounded by luxury and power. The finest clothes, the most delicious foods, and the most exquisite education were all at his disposal. Yet these material comforts could not erase the pain he felt for his people. Yet he never forgot his true identity. Allah had placed a natural love for his people in his heart. This love was a constant reminder of who he truly was, despite the royal surroundings. As Musa grew older, he witnessed the suffering of the Israelites firsthand. He saw their backs bent under the weight of heavy burdens, their faces etched with lines of despair. He saw their pain, their hardship, and their despair. The cries of the oppressed echoed in his ears, and the sight of their suffering seared into his memory. His heart ached for them, and he yearned to help them. The luxury of the palace felt like a prison as he grappled with the injustice he witnessed daily. His conscience wouldn't allow him to stay silent. The more he saw, the more he felt compelled to act, to do something to alleviate their suffering. One day, Musa saw an Egyptian overseer brutally beating an Israelite slave. The sight was too much for him to bear. Filled with anger and a sense of justice, Musa intervened. He could not stand by and watch his people be treated so cruelly. In the heat of the moment, he struck the Egyptian, accidentally killing him. The realization of what he had done hit him like a tidal wave. This event was a turning point in Musa's life. He knew that his actions would have severe consequences, and that he could no longer stay in Pharaoh's palace. He realized he could no longer stay in Pharaoh's palace. He had to flee. The palace, once a place of refuge, had become a place of danger. Musa left the only home he had ever known, leaving behind a life of comfort and privilege. The decision was not easy, but it was necessary. He chose the path of righteousness, the path that Allah had chosen for him. The journey ahead was uncertain, but Musa was determined to follow the path of justice and truth. Little did he know that his journey would lead him back to Egypt, but this time not as a prince, but as a prophet. His destiny was far greater than he could have ever imagined, and his return would mark the beginning of a new chapter for his people. Section 4. The Call to Prophethood. Musa journeyed across the desert, seeking refuge in the land of Madian. Tired and thirsty, he arrived at a well where he encountered two women struggling to water their flock. Musa, known for his strength and kindness, helped them. The women invited Musa to their home, where he met their elderly father, Prophet Shu'aib, also known as Jethro. Impressed by Musa's character, Shu'aib offered him shelter and work. Musa accepted, finding peace and solace in their company. He later married one of Shu'aib's daughters. One day, while tending to his flock at Mount Tur, Musa experienced something extraordinary. He saw a fire in the distance and approached it, hoping to find warmth and guidance. But as he drew closer, he heard a voice calling out to him. It was the voice of Allah Almighty, revealing himself to Musa. Allah declared Musa as his chosen prophet and gave him a mission to return to Egypt and confront Pharaoh. He was to deliver Allah's message to Pharaoh, free the Israelites, and worship the one true God. Musa felt the weight of this responsibility, but submitted to Allah's will. Section 5. The Power of Miracles. Armed with faith and Allah's divine support, Musa returned to Egypt. He stood before Pharaoh, the most powerful man on earth, and delivered Allah's message. But Pharaoh, arrogant and blinded by his own power, refused to listen. He mocked Musa and the God he preached. To prove his prophethood, Musa showed Pharaoh a miracle. He threw his staff to the ground, and instantly it transformed into a serpent, slithering and hissing. This stunned Pharaoh and his court, but Pharaoh, stubborn and proud, dismissed it as mere magic. Allah sent more miracles to convince Pharaoh. He turned the Nile River into blood, unleashed swarms of locusts, and inflicted Egypt with plagues. Each plague was a test for Pharaoh and a sign for his people. Yet, with each miracle, Pharaoh's heart hardened further. He refused to acknowledge Allah's power and continued to oppress the Israelites. Musa's faith was tested, but he remained steadfast in his mission. He knew that Allah was with him. Despite the challenges, he continued to call Pharaoh to the truth, reminding him of Allah's might and the day of judgment. But Pharaoh remained unmoved. Section 6. Let my people go. With each plague, Pharaoh became more desperate. He saw his kingdom suffering, his people pleading for him to listen to Musa, but his pride blinded him. He clung to his power, unwilling to admit defeat even to a god. Musa, on behalf of Allah, presented Pharaoh with an ultimatum: let my people go. He demanded that Pharaoh free the Israelites from their bondage and allow them to worship Allah freely. But Pharaoh's heart had become hardened. He refused to acknowledge Allah's power and continued to oppress the Israelites. The final plague was the most devastating. Allah sent an angel of death to pass over Egypt, taking the lives of all firstborn sons, including Pharaoh's own son. The cries of mourning echoed through the palace walls. Finally, Pharaoh's arrogance crumbled. Broken and defeated, he agreed to free the Israelites. But as Musa and his people left, Pharaoh's heart hardened again. He regretted his decision and, consumed by his desire for revenge, gathered his army and chased after them.